Hey there folks, Flynn here. Today we are at my private shooting range on Macrotech, and we're going to be taking a look at the P4AR. Now this is a weapon that's made by Behring. It's a company that's been making weaponry since around 2550 or so well over 400 years. And they are a very, very tried and true manufacturer, so to speak. They make ship weapons, personal weapons, everything. This is their most famous firearm, basically the old M4 of the verse in more ways than one, which we're going to get into. Now this weapon in particular started out in development as the P4SC, which is for the UEE Marine Corps. It was sort of to bridge the gap between submachine gun and assault rifle, and that concept got completely scrapped and reworked into just what we now know as the P4AR. And of course it very quickly spread to the rest of the military, as well as civilian contractors and markets, and there's a very good reason for that. Now this is an assault rifle. By definition, this is a select fire weapon in an intermediate cartridge. That is the definition. And in this case, intermediate cartridge is 5.56. I'm sure all of my fellow military guys would recognize it. It's a very, very common round, although of course over these past 900 years, the round has evolved quite a bit. When it first came out, way back in the end of the 20th century, they were still using brass casings at that point, right? So they weren't getting the full power out of the rounds as we do now to be able to penetrate armor. And we'll get to that also more as we go on. It is a bit cold out here, so my armor has been frosting over a little bit. So bear with me here. All right, now let's go ahead and test fire this thing real quick. We'll put it on semi-auto. As you can see, as I shoot it, it has a reciprocating charging handle, which is, there's various design decisions that I'm not the biggest fan of this firearm, as we'll go over it. Makes it a lot less ergonomic than it should be, but it's very, very reliable. Very reliable. I've never got a malfunction with this firearm, not even once. And of course, us being on the frontier of space, civilians have access to the fun mode, which is fantastic. Sometimes a waste of ammo for sure, but it's a good deal of fun. Now it does have a 40-round magazine, which can be purchased for around 200 credits, give or take. The rifle itself, I should have mentioned this earlier, the rifle itself runs between 4,000 and 6,000 credits. Depending on where you get it from, pyro is going to be more expensive. You can get it from almost any gun shop, basically. It's one of the most popular firearms out there for a reason. I currently run mine with a red dot and a compensator. Compensator helps with the recoil a lot. This might not be the ideal setup, but for me it works, and so that's honestly, that's what you want for a firearm, is whatever you are effective with. Who cares what, the most optimal thing is? Whatever you can use, that's what you should have on there. Looking at this firearm once again, I mean, it is a pretty firearm, of course, way better than the Gen 1 version, right? But I'm not really a fan of this. So if you look around where the trigger is, there's no trigger guard, which makes sense, right? Because a lot of people with their heavy armor, they're going to be using like really heavy, like armored gloves, right? You want to be able to fit in there. And kind of going with that note, I'm not really sure why they've connected the pistol grip, as you can see here, to the magazine area, which I don't really understand why that's the case. It just kind of gets in the way more often than not. Trying to get your hand out and in kind of quickly, you can get your pinky finger stuck on it. It's not the most ergonomic design, so I'm not really sure why that's there. Maybe you guys more enlightened can tell me in the comments. Now, being 5.56, what you kind of get out of this is you get more ammo in your magazine, first and foremost, but there's a downside to that as well. Armor penetration, like I've mentioned, has gotten better over the years, and for various reasons, this gun is now being phased out more or less by the P8AR, which fires 7.62. And the main reasoning for this is armor penetration. Now, there is a lot of data that we can go into regarding penetration values, effectiveness versus, heavy, medium, light armored targets. And I've kind of boiled it down to what I think is probably the most digestible data, right? I'm not going to overwhelm you with hundreds and hundreds of variabilities. The main data point I'm going to use is how long it actually takes to penetrate chest and torso armor, right? Because that's mostly where they're going to be aiming. You're going to be aiming center mass. That's your biggest target. Of course, headshots are great, but if you're aiming for the head and you miss, you're better off aiming for the torso to begin with. So I have done some testing on my own. Like I said, there's a lot of variable points, but on average, around the average engagement range, which is around 25 meters, give or take, maybe a little bit more. On a lightly armored target, you're going to be looking at around 11 shots in order to break through, which isn't actually as much as you would think. This weapon has a fire rate of around 810 rounds per minute, which is pretty fast. You can get a lot of lead down range in a very short amount of time. I mean, just watch this. And that's literally all it takes to go through, very highly armored opponents. Which going to medium armor, that moves it around 12 shots to get penetration, and you're looking at about 14 for heavy armored targets. Like I said, this is very, very, very variable, right? So you're depending on what range you are from the target, whether you shoot them in the head, the arm, the legs, And a huge thing these stats don't take into account is bleed out. So there's a very good chance you could penetrate the suit and cause the target to bleed out within like maybe 10 rounds, right? 10 or 11 rounds, just give or take on heavy armor. And if you do manage to land all headshots, maybe you have a close engagement, you're gonna be looking at around 5 to 6 rounds to penetrate, give or take. So if we want to extrapolate that data down to a point like time to kill, right? Which would be like how many rounds it takes to get those shots on target to effectively put your opponent out of action. Might not necessarily kill them, but you want them to be down, right? That's the whole point of aiming center mass to begin with. For light armor, you're looking at a 0.76 time to kill. For medium armor, that goes to 0.81. And heavy armor tops out at 0.96. Now, obviously, this would be significantly less if they're not wearing armor, if they're not even wearing their undersuit. Of course, in this case, they're not going to stand a chance regardless, so I'm not even going to bother with those values, right? You're going to kill them like immediately, right? More or less. All right, so why is the P4 AR so successful, right? So, well, first of all, it is a rifle in a very short configuration, right? Which is kind of what they were going for, the original SMG concept, which they ended up just scrapping and making a rifle anyway. It's pretty light. The whole thing weighs around 7 pounds, which is like a 3.2 like kilograms, whatever, for my non-pound people. You've just got a lot of firepower baked into a relatively small package here. The reason why you'd want something with a shorter barrel is obviously for inside of a ship. So let's kind of go over to my ship over here. So obviously if you're going to be doing boarding actions, right, you don't want a giant barrel getting in the way, trying to go around corners or through doors, like a bunch of people stacked up on top of one another. You want to be able to move your weapon more freely, right? And as you can see, you can get really, really close to the corner. Like plenty of space to maneuver here. Very, very handy in close quarters and small interiors such as ships or buildings, which is why it's being used a lot by security contractors. Now, like I said, this is actively being replaced with the bigger and better in basically every single way P8 AR. I believe the Navy has started adopting it from what I've heard, the rumors. And so while this weapon is being replaced, it very much is still very, very, very lethal. And I think it still maintains a pretty cool role in its intended use case. I believe there's a stat out there. This weapon is actually responsible for the most deaths in the verse than any other weapon. Just like across the board, which is actually kind of crazy to think about. Like the old, 5.56 cartridge is still going strong. All right, so sort of the pros and cons here that I've been talking about. I do like the telescoping stock. That is fantastic. There is an ambidextrous magazine release on both sides of the firearm. It does not have an ambidextrous safety selector though, which is an interesting choice. I'm still not sure what this cutout is right here above the magazine you can see because it ejects through the right-hand side. I'm not entirely sure what that specific cutout there is for, but I do like the fact that the charging handle is on the left-hand side. Makes it very ergonomic, kind of similar to something like an old, like an MP5, right? If you guys are familiar with that firearm. Although this one reciprocates, the MP5 does not. Which reciprocating means as I shoot it, it goes backwards, which that is an interesting design choice. If your thumb is there, you're going to have a very, very bad day. I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do that, but like I mentioned earlier, the reliability of this thing is fantastic, so maybe that has something to do with it. I genuinely don't know. Now, another thing I want to talk about briefly is I don't know why they didn't make it a bullpup. So if you guys aren't familiar, a bullpup is a firearm where the magazine is actually behind the pistol grip. The idea is you get a much longer barrel out of a firearm with a much shorter package, if that makes any sense. I don't know why they didn't choose to do this. I've noticed a lot of manufacturers in the verse don't like doing this. But now the reason I think a bullpup style would be very, very good for this particular weapon platform is because the barrel length on the current P4, it kind of sucks. Like, I know we have more advanced cartridges, but the 5.56 out of a barrel this small, punching out to any sort of meaningful range is going to be next to impossible. It works fine for close quarters, right? I mean, that's its intended use case. But any sort of range whatsoever in wide open spaces like this, you're going to be struggling. And I think that's a really big reason why the P8 is really starting to outclass this thing. The reason for this, shorter barrel length, you're not going to have as much rifling. You're not going to be able to spin the bullet as fast as you would normally. You're not going to have that stability. It's going to be more inherently unstable, and it might even start tumbling depending on how far you shoot out, which for those of you who understand aerodynamics, a tumbling bullet is very, very inaccurate. And not only would it be less accurate, you would also have less velocity, which is, not something you want for armor penetration. You want as much velocity as possible. I would like to see a lot more bullpup firearms in the future. It is some of my favorite style of weapon. Okay, so going to the range is all and good, but let's go ahead and try this thing out in a real use case scenario. Let's check the contract, see what we can get up to here. So here's a mission here. We have to help protect a site that's currently under attack, an MT security center on Microtech. So let's go ahead and we'll do this one real quick. Have to make sure to be careful of friendly fire. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and fly there, and I'll meet you guys outside the facility.
Takeoff complete.
All right, here we are. We're coming up on the security center here. Looks like it's just a facility out in the mountains. Pretty remote. I'm not sure why it's under attack, but it's not really, that's not what I get paid for. I don't get paid to ask questions. I don't know how the hostiles got here. I don't see any ships. One of these tourists might have taken their ship out. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's the debris that we shoot. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yes, we see some debris there. They're still inside the facility, though. Let's go ahead and put landing gear down. Those might be hostiles right there. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and land. They haven't spotted me yet. I'm gonna land on this side. Work my way up. Alrighty, so they did say there were friendlies in the area, so we're gonna have to watch out for that. I don't want my shadow to give me away here. Let me stay in the shadows a bit. Now, for those of you who may be wondering why we aim center mass, the reasoning for that is once you penetrate armor, I'm gonna try to hit their spine, right? Because that's what's gonna crumple them. Because people do survive headshots sometimes. It's a more reliable way of taking people out. But while they're not seeing me, I might go for the head anyway. Because these do not look like security personnel. All right, let's go ahead and fire off a couple rounds. There we go. Tango's down. I saw 3 at least out here. Let's move up. Oh, shit. There you go. Tango down. Reloading. There you go. It goes down. I got winged. Okay, here we go. They seem incapacitated. Move their weapons away from them. I am wearing medium armor, so I'm not as heavily equipped as I could be. Here we go. Okay, here contact down below. Go over the edge. Sounds like energy weapons going off too. Okay, their sights aren't zeroed. That's good for me. All right, here we go. Friendly's coming through. Oh shit, there he is. Ah, friendly down. Damn it. That's what I was saying. Move up forward fast. These guys suck. Okay. There's one guy remaining. Alright. Enemies defeated. I'm not seeing any alive security personnel. I guess maybe we arrived too late. Wait, here we go. Oh, they were, okay. Oh, they were hiding inside the elevators. Okay. Alright, guys. Coast is clear. Should be good now. Alright, there we go. I almost ran out of ammo, actually. Yes, the P8SC. Might be worth talking about next, honestly. Yeah, so as you can see, very, very... Oh, I got winged again. Very, very combat effective. Even while the round may be a bit outdated. Man. It does its job pretty well, still. I didn't even use the best tactics, of course. I'm a bit rusty. So it's been a little while. There's some more security personnel. We still managed to get the job done regardless. So, yeah. Job well done. Well, I hope you folks enjoyed this more in-depth breakdown of the P4 AR. If you want me to do some other guns, just let me know. This is just kind of something I thought would be fun to do. Feel free to let me know what you think of it. I hope you enjoyed and you have a fantastic rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Take it easy, guys.